At ERO 450, the Chinese destroyer Zhonang locked its radar onto the USS Nimitz, a heartbeat from unleashing a salvo of YJ-18 missiles that could ignite war in the South China Sea. This was no drill. One misstep could sink $3.6 trillion in global trade and millions of lives. How did America turn this brink of chaos into a crushing lesson for Beijing? Let's find out right now. At 4:37 a.m. on August 18th, the 2025, the South China Sea lay shrouded in pre-dawn darkness, its calm waters hiding a storm about to erupt. The USS Princeton, a Ticonderoga-class cruiser, sliced through international waters on a routine freedom of navigation patrol, 160 nautical miles from the nearest Chinese outpost. Its mission was clear: uphold the right to sail where $3.6 trillion in global trade flows unimpeded. But at that exact moment, a Chinese Type 052D destroyer, the Zhonang, broke from its loitering pattern 180 kilometers away, accelerating from 18 to 30 knots in a blistering 90 seconds. The radar blips painted a chilling picture for the American crew. Beijing had just issued orders to intercept the USS Princeton and force it to blink first. It was a gamble destined to fail spectacularly. The U.S. Navy, a force honed by decades of blue water dominance, was about to teach China a lesson in why challenging America on the open seas is a catastrophic mistake. How would the USS Princeton turn this act of aggression into a demonstration of unmatched power? Let's dive into the truth right now. At precisely 4:37 a.m., the USS Princeton's AN/SPY-1 radar, the beating heart of its Aegis combat system, locked onto the Chinese destroyer's sudden surge. The Zhonang's acceleration was no accident. In Beijing, High Command had greenlit a bold provocation: intercept the American cruiser and assert dominance in waters that belong to no nation. The Chinese captain, under strict orders, pushed his Type 052D to its limits, its gas turbines roaring as it closed the distance. But the Americans were ready. Inside the Princeton's Combat Information Center, CIC, radar operators classified the Zhonang as a moderate to high threat. At its current speed, it would enter weapons engagement range in exactly 17 minutes. The math was cold and unforgiving. The Zhonang's YJ-18 anti-ship missiles could strike in under 4 minutes once launched. But the Princeton's SM-6 missiles, with a reach of 240 nautical miles, could swat them down like gnats. The tactical action officer, eyes glued to the display, relayed the data with a calm forged in countless drills. "Captain, she's on an intercept course. 14 minutes to weapons range." The captain, Commander Emily Voss, a 20-year veteran of Pacific operations, leaned back in her chair, her voice steady as steel. "Let's see how far they're willing to push this." Her confidence wasn't bravado. It was the weight of 122 vertical launch cells, each loaded with enough firepower to turn the Zhonang into a floating wreck. The South China Sea was no stranger to tension, but this was different. The sea lanes carried 46 merchant vessels within 50 miles, a Singaporean container ship packed with semiconductors, a Japanese oil tanker worth $300 million, all relying on the U.S. Navy's presence to keep the waters free. Beijing's gambit wasn't just a challenge to the Princeton, it was a middle finger to global trade. At 4:40, the USS Princeton's cooperative engagement capability kicked into gear, sharing real-time threat data across the Nimitz carrier strike group. The USS Nimitz, a 1,460-ton behemoth carrying 90 aircraft, adjusted its flight operations with the precision of a Swiss watch. Destroyers USS Changhoon and USS Kidd repositioned to form a defensive arc around the carrier, their radar systems painting a picture so clear it could count the rivets on the Zhonang's hull. By 4:45, the tactical picture grew darker. An E-2D Hawkeye, orbiting at 25,000 feet, detected multiple contacts launching from the Chinese carrier Shandong, 220 nautical miles away. The radar signatures were unmistakable. J-15 fighters, climbing hard but struggling to gain altitude. Their ski jump launch system, a relic of outdated carrier design, forced them to burn fuel at a punishing rate, limiting their payload and range. The American air controllers smirked at the feed. "They're fighting gravity harder than they'll fight us," one quipped. A minute later, sonar operators aboard the Princeton added another piece to the puzzle: a submerged contact. 80 nautical miles out, matched the acoustic signature of a Type 039 diesel-electric submarine. Its noise was deafening, like a freight train rumbling through the deep. The Chinese were orchestrating a multi-domain intimidation campaign: surface, air, and subsurface. But their equipment was a museum piece compared to the U.S. Navy's cutting-edge arsenal. The J-15s were flying antiques. The Type 052D was a 1990s design, and the submarine might as well have been broadcasting its position on open radio. Beijing was betting on bravado, but they'd picked the wrong Navy to bully. The USS Princeton's crew watched the Yonang's vector with icy focus. At 4:50, the Chinese destroyer crossed a dangerous threshold, locking its Type 346A phased array radar onto the USS Nimitz with fire control quality tracking. In naval warfare, this was the equivalent of pointing a loaded gun. The CIC buzzed with tension, but American discipline held firm. "They're testing us," Commander Voss said, her voice cutting through the hum of electronics. "Hold fire. Document everything." The Princeton's own fire control radars remained in standby, but its 122 vertical launch cells were primed. SM-6 and SM-2 missiles ready to turn the Yonang into an artificial reef in seconds. The Chinese radar lock persisted for 30 seconds, long enough to send a message, not long enough to trigger immediate retaliation. It was choreographed aggression, but against a Navy that wrote the book on restraint and precision. Meanwhile, in the air, a J-15 pilot broke formation, diving toward an F-18 in a reckless thump maneuver meant to intimidate. The American pilot, trained at Top Gun, rolled inverted and slid into the Chinese fighter's 6 o'clock position. For 3 seconds, his helmet-mounted display showed the J-15's engines glowing hot in infrared, a perfect shot for an AIM-9X Sidewinder. He didn't fire. Discipline held. At 4:55, the Chinese submarine made a fatal mistake. The Type 039, previously masked by the thermocline, raised its snorkel to recharge batteries. TAO, subsurface contact, bearing 159, range 15,000 yards, the sonar operator reported. "She's snorkeling. Noisy as a freight train. Probable Type 039. The Princeton's SQQ-89 sonar suite had tracked its acoustic signature for the past hour, fixing its position to within meters. If this went kinetic, an ASROC torpedo would end the submarine's career in 12 seconds. The Chinese were now boxed in: carrier to the northwest, destroyer to the west, submarine to the southwest. If shooting started, none would survive the first 5 minutes. At 5, the USS Nimitz's flight deck erupted into controlled chaos. 48 aircraft, FA-18E Super Hornets, EA-18G Growlers, and E-2D Hawkeyes launched at 45-second intervals. A ballet of steam and steel that Chinese ski jump carriers could only dream of matching. The Super Hornets climbed to 15,000 feet, their AN/APG-79 ESA radars painting the J-15s at maximum range. The technological gap was staggering. The American radars tracked dozens of targets simultaneously, while the J-15's mechanically scanned arrays swept back and forth like lighthouses, broadcasting their positions. The Growlers went to work, their ALQ-249 jamming pods frying Chinese communications. On Chinese radar screens, ghost contacts multiplied. 4 F-18s became 12, then 20. Radar locks broke and reformed, leaving J-15 pilots chasing phantoms. The Americans executed a wall formation, a defensive masterpiece honed over decades. High cabs at 35,000 feet, medium at 25,000, low at 15,000. Multiple overlapping engagement zones with no escape for the Chinese. The J-15s, bunched tightly due to their limited data links, were sitting ducks. Their pilots, reliant on voice commands, burned fuel in futile climbs, unable to match the Americans' endurance. By 5:10, the Chinese escalation reached its peak. The Type 039 submarine crept closer, but its snorkeling had betrayed it. The Princeton's sonar operators smirked. "He's begging for an ass rock," one muttered. Meanwhile, a Virginia-class submarine, USS Delaware, surfaced 6 nautical miles from the Shandong, its black hull breaching the water like a predator. For 8 days, it had shadowed the Chinese carrier undetected, rendering their anti-submarine defenses laughable. The psychological blow was crushing. Chinese lookouts snapped photos as the Delaware lingered for 90 seconds before vanishing beneath the waves. The message was clear: we own the undersea domain. By 5:20, the Chinese formation crumbled. The J-15s, low on fuel from their ski jump launches, peeled off one by one, limping back to the Shandong with bingo lights flashing. The Jonang broke off its intercept course, its radar lock disengaged. The Type 039 submerged, its captain likely sweating under the weight of his failure. The Shandong's carrier strike group began a full retreat, their scheduled exercises complete, according to official Chinese channels. But the truth was undeniable. They'd come to intimidate, to claim waters that weren't theirs. Instead, they'd been schooled in why the South China Sea remains America's 6th Great Lake. The USS Princeton and the Nimitz strike group stood tall, their crews unshaken, their systems unmatched. The numbers told the story. 48 American aircraft launched, 0 losses, Chinese forces humiliated, their multi-domain campaign reduced to a footnote. By dawn on August 18, 2025, the South China Sea was quiet once more, but the echoes of the night's confrontation reverberated across the globe. Beijing's gamble to challenge the U.S. Navy had collapsed in spectacular fashion. The Shandong's J-15s returned with empty tanks, their pilots outmaneuvered and outclassed. The Jonang's radar lock, meant as a show of strength, only exposed its vulnerability. The Type 039 submarine, loud as a freight train, was a laughingstock to American sonar operators. In Washington, the Pentagon's statement was blunt. The United States Navy will continue to ensure freedom of navigation. Any challenge to that mission will be met with overwhelming resolve. For the 5,000 sailors of the Nimitz strike group, this was more than a victory. It was proof of their dominance, their discipline, their unbreakable spirit. Beijing had learned a hard lesson. Arrogance on the high seas leads only to humiliation when it collides with American power. What do you think this means for China's naval ambitions? Will they dare challenge the U.S. Navy again, or has this night buried their dreams of dominance? Share your thoughts below. And if you value this kind of in-depth analysis, like, subscribe, and hit the bell to stay locked into the battles shaping our world.